Alrighty. Hey everybody, welcome back to the TruthWire. I am here with our co-host for the day, Matt Weinglass of the Homeless Left. Matt has been doing a lot of streams. I've been seeing you everywhere. So nice to have you here, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good to be here as always, and doing the hard stuff, doing the work that the mainstream refuses to do. That's why we're in the space. So I appreciate the opportunity today. Got some big stuff to get into today, it looks like. So
yeah, there's a lot going on. It's been extremely busy for the new year. You know, I think everybody thought, man, 2025, that was rough. Can't get any rougher. And you know, Matt, we all saw what happened with the US attack on Venezuela, the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro. We also have seen things ramp up in Iran. We've seen also attacks in Lebanon. We've seen also, of course, Russia, Ukraine continue. And you know, there's breaking news that we're going to talk to with our guests about, and that is that Venezuela is sending a delegation to the United States, and the United States is sending a delegation to Venezuela to possibly have conversations about reopening diplomatic relations. And this has been confirmed via a communique between the from the Venezuelan government. So that is confirmed, that is happening. And in the whole situation with Venezuela, you know, I've been very careful to not just make assumptions on what's going on. There's a lot of people on the ground. There's a lot of people that have been reporting directly from Venezuela. However, I think myself included, and a lot of people have had a lot of questions as to how everything went down, right? And how all of this unleashed. And we know that Trump has already sent a warning to Mexico that of a possible invasion. And I think that's something where you can say a lot, because, you know, being in LA and having that closeness with Mexico, I'd like to hear your perspective on that. But yeah, just your thoughts on all of that so far.
I mean, so far, yeah. I mean, this is we do have to make the distinction between what we're hearing from the Trump administration, even though what they're saying seems to be very blatantly on point a lot of the time, which we're not used to.
Yeah.
I think people aren't used to having our president tell us exactly what's happening and not beat around the bush about it. But with that said, it is important to talk to people on the ground and be there, like what is actually happening. We appreciate, you know, folks at RT are getting there on the ground in Venezuela. And, you know, we were, you know, it's really interesting. We happened to be in Mexico for New Year's, and when everything went down there. And I know, like, look, I understand, like, in LA, if you talk to people here in LA, people will tell you they're scared to death of what's going on in Mexico. They said, oh, don't even go down there. No, it's what I'm seeing a lot. And I'll make a distinction here between Venezuela and Mexico. A lot of the Mexico stuff that Trump is talking about, a lot of that is a lot of bark and no bite. And so I think that Venezuela, we got to take a lot more seriously. We are talking to people on the ground. We know that on January 3rd, there was an actual attack, and like people were murdered. People were killed. It was a all out assault. They were in the middle of warfare versus Mexico. There's a lot of bark about it. Is that invasion going to happen? We can get into more of that later. But my initial gut instinct is that no, I think that's not necessarily something Trump's going to do. He's just being very loud and vocal about it at this point. But Venezuela, we have to take a lot more seriously right now, clearly, because they kidnapped the president, and that's not a joke. And so there are consequences to that, and there's things we need to obviously dive into there, which, yeah, I guess we're going to do today.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm glad you made that distinction, because you're right. I mean, the United States economy is also very much intertwined with Mexico's. And, you know, I was just in Mexico actually on my way to Peru. And Mexico is inundated with expats and a lot of people who have moved there from the United States and from Europe. And things seem pretty calm there. There seems to be a substantial amount of support for the current president. And I'm not really seeing what I saw before. There's still poverty. There's still people, you know, that are on the streets, but not in the same way that I've seen in other countries. And it's an interesting dynamic right now. So it'll be interesting to watch as this goes forward. But the one thing about
can I just throw one more thing in about the distinction with Mexico? Being here in LA, people say, "Oh, don't go down to Mexico; it's dangerous." I say, you know what? And we're going to talk about ICE today, but I'm going to tell you right now, being on the streets in LA and then seeing what's going on in Minneapolis, obviously it's terrible. It's horrible. What our country has become, what the police state has become here is nothing compared to Mexico. I'm telling you, like being on the streets there, I'm not saying it's perfectly roses and daisies and flowers. I'm saying that there is more of a communication you can have with the police, with the military. There's an actual communication there. There's actually the thing that we thought police was supposed to be, even though there's corruption. Again, it's not perfect, but there's an element of that you can have a conversation. You can figure out what's happening and get yourself through something. When you have police shooting people in the head here on our country, I don't know. I don't know exactly what you're afraid of going to Mexico for when we're dealing with this right here, right now.
Yeah.
It's no joke. So I'm just making that distinction for people.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I really want to dive into that because, they've talked about Iran being dangerous, Venezuela. I get this all the time because I travel everywhere. And every time I hear, why are you going there? It's dangerous. It's dangerous. I'm like, honestly, the most dangerous place for me has been the United States. I can't walk through LA at night, like, and all of this stuff. Like I felt pretty safe where I was in Mexico. And a lot of people just have a hard time believing that. I stayed for a few days. I was with my dog. Like it was normal. I didn't feel unsafe, but I do feel unsafe every time I'm in the United States, not just because of the drugs or the crime, but also just because of just the state of people right now, like, and the state of the government and the police state and like how everything is. So I completely agree with you there. So why don't we just start with Venezuela because our guest is here. And before I bring him in, I just kind of want to mention again the breaking news coming from Venezuela, and I'll actually read it now. Camilla just posted this from Casachuan News, and she said, confirmed the U.S. State Department delegation is arriving in Venezuela, and a delegation of Venezuelan diplomats will be sent to the United States. She's quoting from the Comunicado. Venezuela has decided to initiate an exploratory diplomatic process with the government of the United States of America aimed at reestablishing diplomatic missions in both countries with the purpose of addressing the consequences of the aggression and kidnapping of the President of the Republic and First Lady, as well as addressing a working agenda of mutual interest. Now, before we get Danny's take on this, I want to hear your take, but also I want to say, in particular, that quote specifically talks about addressing Nicolas Maduro's kidnapping. What I know from my sources is that they are very passionately trying to get Nicolas Maduro out, that they are very adamant about that there has been no regime change in Venezuela because the Chavistas are still in charge, and Delcy Rodriguez is committed to following Nicolas Maduro's steps. There was also a video circulating online that had Hugo Chavez, not a video, but an edit about a conversation between Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro that they had a long time ago, where Hugo Chavez thought he was done, and Castro basically told him to make some negotiations, but don't give up. And we can kind of apply to that to Venezuela's strategy. For the longest time, Nicolas Maduro has been talking about peace negotiations with the United States. He has been the one that said that. It seems like Delcy Rodriguez is leading with that. A lot of people can take this and say, wow, why are you even trying to have a conversation with the United States? Because they just literally kidnapped your president. Do you know who they are? Things never end well, right? And I tend to be on that camp a lot of the time. However, I see Venezuela doing this. This is like very normal for them, the same way that Russia and China have been quite diplomatic with the United States. So I don't think their strategy is to have war and revenge. I think their strategy is to show that there is another way. However, that strategy goes with an entity like the United States empire. I think, a lot of us feel like it's not respected. So I want to hear your take on that, and then we'll bring Danny right in.
So yeah, looking at Delcy Rodriguez, obviously her history comes into play, and the relationship, the tight relationship with Maduro, the tight relationship previously with Chavez and the Chavista movement, which originated with Chavez. That there's a loyalty there that you can't. I don't, from my suspicion, just looking at it, there's no real way to break that, no matter what kind of pressure you put at it. Now, at the same time, the Chavistas, so you got these colectivos, right? They're out right now, showing their numbers in masses that we have never seen before. And so a lot of people are looking at that going, oh, well, it's because they're not trusting her, because why would you sit down at all with this empire? It makes no sense. That seems to go against the Chavista way. So there's a lot of like tension in the street. We know that. However, you have to be able to have conversations. You have to. And if you want to get Maduro back, there has to be some sort of dialogue. Does it mean that she's willing, or is there somebody in there? Is there a crack in this fortress that is willing to give up the entire movement and bring this complete chaos we haven't ever seen in Venezuela? And we know it's been bad there, but is that what we're looking at? The kind of that initial crack that's going to bring the whole thing down? It's hard to say, but looking at their history with her, I believe this is, and I think you alluded to this, Fee, that the correct move is to have this conversation. And we know by history, and Russia, China, we know the same thing. There's a certain control. There's a resolve when you know that there's not a track record of vengeful, spiteful, aggression that we don't see from Venezuela. So we know that there's going to be kind of a good, kind of a good nature, good actor kind of going into these conversations. So who knows what's going to come out of this right now? But it's hard to say if you're in the streets of Caracas right now. Things are very on edge. Again, these collectivos are in the streets right now. They're showing their presence, and I would not want to be there right now. Not that we can even get in, but it is very tense right now. So we'll see how things unfold. That's my initial take.
All right. Yeah, a lot of good things that you said there. Hey, Danny, nice to see you. This is Danny Shaw, longtime friend, anti-imperialist, journalist. Wherever he is now, I'm sure he's doing some good things. Nice to see you, Danny.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Fiorella. Well, I wish I was in the streets of Caracas, shoulder to shoulder with the comunas and
Yeah.
colectivos. I've been traveling to Venezuela since 2014. I've had a weekly segment on national Venezuelan news since that time period. I've been with Telesur now for 12 years, never receiving $1 for this solidarity work, but uh, a bunch of us organizers, professors, anti-imperialist journalists have functioned as de facto people's ambassadors to Venezuela because the U.S. long ago cut off the diplomatic relationship. So thanks for the opportunity to share my experiences working with Nicolas Maduro, Delcy Rodriguez, Diosdado Cabello, like you all correctly said. This is a principled, unbreakable Bolivarian relationship. That's why the number one CIA, New York Times talking point is division, 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 divide and conquer, and trying to find or speculate about this or that snitch or someone sold them out. And social media has been rife with the CIA talking points. And of course, this is what gets the algorithms going as well. So just wanted to introduce myself in that way.
Yeah, well, Danny, you rightfully talked about the social media stuff, right? When Maduro was kidnapped, there was so much AI slop, right? Right along with the Grok thing and putting out fake AI videos of Venezuelans celebrating Maduro's defeat. There was also AI videos of Maduro. There's even been a movie made about Maduro's capture using AI. I mean, it's becoming kind of insane what's out there. People don't know how to differentiate. I also saw a lot of accounts come out of nowhere with a lot of very like drastic, intense takes on what happened. Accounts that have zero footprint in Venezuela, zero following, zero support, talking about a betrayal from Delcy Rodriguez and the selling out of Maduro. Some of this is being said in our very chat right now, and I want to put it out there to you to go a little bit deeper into why that isn't true. Not just because Venezuela has denied it, because people will say, well, Venezuela maybe is trying to cover up this because they don't want people to know. I want to know how you would debunk something like this, because a lot of people had questions as to how easily Maduro was captured. And by the way, it wasn't easily, because people died. A lot of people died defending
100
him,
plus,
and
100
a
plus.
hundred plus, and some Americans, apparently now the United States has admitted at least 7 American troops were injured. So the thing is, like, a lot of the information hasn't been flat out set out there. So people made their own judgments and just went with whatever was algorithmically pushed on X. So how would you describe Delcy Rodriguez, that I think a lot of people didn't know how loyal she was, where she comes from, and why you don't buy that, same as the Venezuelan officials that have spoken, that there was this major betrayal. I mean, there's been some admission from some sources that there was mid-level, but there's not this whole thing. They're denying that Delcy Rodriguez has made a deal with Trump, which is what Trump is also alleging.
Yeah, in terms of even the mid-level, quote unquote, selling out, the smoke still has to clear. I've seen some
Yeah.
refuting that there was even some of these mid-level generals or captains, and they're saying that they're innocent. They just had to shuffle things up. Delcy Rodriguez and her brother Jorge Rodriguez, who's the head of the Asamblea Nacional Popular, are the sons of a former political prisoner, a revolutionary Venezuelan guerrilla, a Chavista before Chavez, if you will, but part of this continuum of the Bolivarian anti-imperialist resistance through the better part of 2 centuries plus, right? So they're tried and true revolutionaries who have been mentored by the same Chavista leadership that came before them. They're in the same class or generation as Nicolas Maduro. I don't take my cues from X or the billionaire's terrain. I take it directly from Delcy Rodriguez and the PSUV leadership, who have functioned in a unified way, like a closed fist for so long. Of course, the Wall Street Journal is going to try to go after Diosdado Cabello. They're going to try to go after Nicolas Maduro Guerra Jr., Nicolas Maduro's son. All of these things are entirely predictable. I've shared many conference halls and stages in El Palacio Miraflores, the presidential palace, and Alba conferences. With all of these individuals. How many times, Matt, Fiorella, and everyone in your chat, have you heard that Fidel Castro sold out Ernesto Che Guevara in the mountains and jungles of Bolivia in 1965? It's a CIA talking point. You have to repeat that 1,000 times to try to convince people when it's complete hogwash. But they want us to think that imperialism is invincible. They don't want to tell us about the soldiers, the mercenaries, the US soldiers, a bunch of whom, ironically, are probably Latinos themselves invading Venezuela. Some of them are probably former students of mine at CUNY. It hits at such a personal level, the way that they have us trapped. The last bullet point I'll make in this little segment is, the Venezuelans and the Cubans are, again, David versus Goliath. I mean, we've seen the Palestinians resist, but what's happening to the Palestinians, up not just against, of course, the IDF, but against all of Western militarism, which supports the IDF. And it's very similar in Venezuela. It wasn't the U.S. even acting alone with their 20,000 soldiers that had invaded the Caribbean. It's the 11 military bases in Panama. It's the 9 military bases in Colombia, even though Gustavo Petro is against them. Contacts in Haiti and the Dominican Republic said they were using new bases and clandestine bases there. So they invaded from some 20 different points across the Caribbean with 200 different ships. These Cubans who stood up, one of those Cubans, one of those Venezuelans who passed, one of those Bolivarian martyrs is worth 1,000 of these people talking shit all day, every day on social media. So many of us forget, even on the left, how fake social media is, the last refuge of the scoundrels.
Yeah.
Danny, can we? I'm curious on your take on the oil contract situation here and the influence, the Zionist influence here. We talked about this, this bidding that occurred. There's people trying to swoop in and get these deals, whether or not they're even plausible that they can go all the way through and actually get the oil. But what do you think about this connection with elevating Israel's needs in this region, and the fact that you're giving these for whatever reason they're getting these priorities to these type of people. I guess we've heard about people like Paul Singer and some others getting kind of their hands in here. Is this all for show, or they have an opportunity to maneuver this for Israel's interest, or is this all going to hit a wall because Venezuela is got this, enough power to stop this from happening? Or what's your take on that as far as where we are now?
Yeah, of course, it makes me nauseous through and through. Israel, what is Israel? What is Zionism but an extension geopolitically, geomilitarily, and geoeconomically of U.S. imperial interests in the Middle East and throughout the world? So, of course, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, in the sense that as the U.S. benefits, their Zionist clientele and vice versa will certainly benefit. Yeah, you all were speaking about this a few minutes back in terms of what moral responsibility or right does Delcy and Jorge and this entire leadership have. Nicolas Maduro has been open to negotiations with Shell, Great Britain, and British imperial interests, and Exxon Mobil, and the Venezuelans are people of peace. They don't benefit from getting bombed and more sanctions and war. It's not that they're naive. They have zero illusions, nor do we, about Trump's true interests and the Democrats and Biden and Obama. I mean, the real war on Venezuela began in 1998, the moment Hugo Chavez won the elections. But it was really the 2014 Obama era economic war, the sanctions, the hybrid war. That's when I saw my Venezuelan friends, colleagues, co-workers, camaradas, compañeros go through the most amount of hunger. So Venezuela's gone through its own special period. The Venezuelan leadership is trying to create space so that people can have toilet paper and toothpaste. And we're talking about a historically exploited and underdeveloped economy that it has had about 27 years to rebuild. And they were really thriving with all of the oil internationalism, the Petro-Caribbean projects, which helped Haiti and Nicaragua and Cuba so much. But then 2014 happened. So, of course, the Venezuelans need outlets for their oil, whether that's working with the Iranians or the Turks. I mean, all of these different business deals occur under capitalist relations because we still live in a capitalist world. And that's another huge debate that we could have. We hear so much about multipolarity. Well, where's the multipolarity when they're bombing Caracas? Where's the multipolarity with the G side that's ongoing against the Palestinian people? But just so people don't get it twisted, sitting in front of their TV screens, their computer screens, the Venezuelans are not naive, but they have every right to search for a way to satisfy the everyday needs of their people, whether it's gasoline and the social missions were thriving up until 2014 because it was financed by oil. So I don't think there's anything counter-revolutionary, reactionary that Delcy has taken this posture. Trump met at the White House with a bunch of these oil execs, and they have all types of doubts because they know that investing in Venezuela could incur some type of guerrilla resistance, and it's going to be a mass movement against the theft of Venezuelan resources. I don't know that it'll be a mass guerrilla movement, but it'll certainly be a mass movement and a patriotic movement in the streets.
Yeah.
Well, my question, Danny, is like, people are having a hard time understanding how Maduro could be captured if there was no internal issue, I guess a sabotage of sorts, because Venezuela, like we've all known Venezuela to be strong, to be very united and unified. And the reality is the United States has done this for a long time. The intelligence apparatus has had its eye in Venezuela. This didn't happen overnight. They've been targeting Nicolas Maduro for a very, very long time. And I think, after Syria, a lot of us have been sort of traumatized as to how quickly that went down. Years and years of resisting the expansion of U.S. and Israeli interests, only to be taken down in a matter of days. It was very telling. And I think a lot of people thought that Russia and China were going to come in and save the day. And I keep telling people, like, that's not how this works. They're not, they're very pragmatic countries. They act on the interests of their people. They're not going to involve themselves in this. But, the reality is that I think a lot of people thought there was going to be more force from Venezuela. and there simply wasn't, or there wasn't the capability to do that. And I think there's been a lot of theories coming even from Russia that, oh, there was betrayal. We've heard the president of Belarus even allude to that, and it kind of just makes me question, like, what is going on here? Why are we putting, only the blame on Venezuela when clearly there really hasn't been any action from the multipolar world towards really doing much for Venezuela?
Yeah, off the top, shout out to Vanessa Bealey and Jeremy and Gloria. Great show you all did. Actually looking at the multipolar context for what's played out in Venezuela and the idea that there's no saviors, because I've written extensively on Russia with Jeremy at Covert Action Magazine. Jeremy's been a great editor and mentor and colleague over the years. And Russia has been very selfish, whether it's vis-a-vis Syria, the Palestinians, et cetera. But they've also dialectically, I'll never forget how many times in Venezuela in 2017 or 2018, when the Russian ambassadors and media workers were introduced, the Fiorellas of a decade ago, or what have you. And it was a standing ovation. Like, Putin has all the contradictions that we laid out, but to the extent to which Putin it has stood up to empire and not rolled over, of course, that would mean in the Middle East and in Venezuela and in the countries in resistance that he has provided a counterweight. In terms of how did the U.S. quote unquote go in so easily, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And we have to understand that social media is based off of intrigue and gossip and conjecturing, and the polarization of the U.S. working class, and the fakes like Jackson Hinkle thrive in these spaces, again, based off of a lot of hearsay and stuff. Just to give out, one real life example of what goes viral. Nicolas Maduro was not hiding. Nicolas Maduro was out in the streets of Caracas every night defying Trump's threats. He was dancing his characteristic salsa y música folclórica. He was at mass rallies. He was chilling with international Dominican internationalists from the Dominican Republic. He was 100% flouting all of the U.S. imperial bullying and threats. He was basically saying, y'all want to come get me? Come get me. I am the democratically elected, the people's leader of Venezuela. And I'm not afraid to say that because I've been in Petare, the South Bronx of Caracas. I've been in El 23 de Enero, where Hugo Chavez is buried. I've been in the ghettos or the barrios or the favelas of Caracas. I've walked those streets. I've traveled across Venezuela. This is a Chavista people. If anyone thinks any type of occupation is going to make the Venezuelan people less Chavista, it's like thinking Black America tomorrow is going to be less Martin Luther King-esque or Malcolm X-esque because Trump said this or that. The Cuban people are a Fidelista people, but can David resist Goliath and Goliath? I mean, the United States is up to a $1.5 trillion military budget, war budget, and that doesn't even include the CIA. So it could just be a case of superior military strength where the Bolivarians, the Cubans, the Venezuelans have acted with the utmost integrity. But unfortunately, the Iraqis resisted the United States. How many millions of Iraqis are dead? How many U.S. soldiers died? The Vietnamese resisted with everything. 3 million of them died from 62 to 1975. That doesn't mean that they sold out or they did that. They're up against just a superior military force. So again, for me, social media is so unimpressive because people talk. Have they been to Venezuela? Have they worked with the Venezuelan leadership? Do they have an understanding of these historical questions? And social media is designed to be the spearhead of a war of disinformation. So you can have a streamer pop up with little experience and he knows it all. And I think that's where so much of this confusion stems from, as it's designed to. And that's why they took over TikTok. That's why they banned and censored and shadow banned all of our accounts, so the true voices, the true experts, the dialecticians can't get out there.
Yeah. I appreciate that explanation, Danny, and I think that that's something that helps us have these conversations with people that have been, intentionally kind of, confused, and they don't know because they're tuning into the wrong networks, or they think, oh, I'm not going to watch CNN, I want to go on Twitter, and then like what you're saying is they're getting this kind of razzle dazzle effect of what's going to get the clickbait versus really looking at it. And I think you make an excellent point about the character. It comes back to character. And when Maduro is singing "Don't Worry, Be Happy" just moments before they come and get him, it is clear that this is something that he stood proudly to do. Come get me. I got nothing to hide. And I think that, and I want to throw this at you just because we saw what happened with this fake charge so we're into the courthouse that they had to drop the drug charge of the Cartel de la Soles. They said it was now it's a cartel. They first accused him of starting and initiating in 1999, which was a complete lie. And now they're admitting that it doesn't exist, but we know it did exist because the CIA created it. Is this part of the confidence Maduro has, that he knows that if they take him into court, is there a chance? And I'll just ask you on your opinion on this. Is there a chance in court that the defense is going to be able to bring this to the table? This evidence, it's so crystal clear to us. If you look at the timetable that the CIA has initiated creating this cartel in order to pin it on Maduro and then take it off the table. Will they have a chance to make that case in court?
Great framing, Matt. I mean, let's go back to Dr. Martin Luther King. What was his strategy in the South? Martin Luther King said these racist police will be the best organizers of the South, because he knew the U.S. public would only have but so much of an appetite for innocent, unarmed Black bodies being mutilated and bitten by dogs and fire hose, somewhat similar to the Gestapo ICE tactics that we're seeing right now in Oregon and in Minnesota. And shout out to all of our people on the ground who are holding it down. It's another George Floyd-esque moment. And again, Minnesota, I mean, shoot, whoever knew Minnesota was so, revolutionary. But the foresight of the Bolivarian leadership is to bring this to world opinion. They know the U.S. can win militarily and the Zionists can win militarily. But in the court of public opinion, for the first time, people are seeing who Nicolas Maduro is, because Nicolas Maduro is one of the most censored human beings in the entire world, along with the Cuban leadership and the now Bolivian leadership, the MAS leadership. And of course, they censor these individuals, but suddenly Nicolas Maduro is in those handcuffs, but he can still be Nicolas Maduro. And he's saying Happy New Year to all the different FBI agents, and he's hugging them, and they want to take selfies with him. So the U.S. public is beginning to see parts of who Nicolas Maduro, who we know because we've spent so much time in Venezuela with the Venezuelan masses. And I mean, it's just an absolute lie that they repeat, similar to Joseph Goebbels. If you repeat a lie 1,000 times, it begins the truth. One of the maxims of the Nazis in the 1930s and 40s. Maduro's never acted as a dictator. It's the United States that's the dictator. It's the Bank of England that stole $2 billion of Venezuelan gold, and they stole PDVSA, and they stole Citgo, and this is highway robbery. These are the pirates of the Caribbean. But because Nicolas Maduro has not buckled, has not bent, that's why they have to consistently deride him. And now Trump's threatening to murder Delcy Rodriguez. He said, if she doesn't do what we want, her fate will be much worse than Nicolas Maduro. I mean, what could be worse than being kidnapped and brutalized? And I heard a report that Maduro was shot. I'm not sure if either of you can confirm that or second that, and that he's not receiving all of the medical treatment that he deserves. Of course, in New York City, there's a constant rallies in solidarity with him. But I think the Venezuelans had this foresight to know. I mean, there were 20,000 U.S. troops surrounding them. I mentioned the 20 military bases used to invade. The Venezuelans weren't naive. Trump promised he was going to do this. It was just a question of whether it would be on Christmas Eve or Christmas or New Year's Day, what day they would pick. But I don't think that the Venezuelans were naive in any way. And I think that they know they're going to win the moral force that stops this. That we know Trump's not going to stop Trump. ICE is not going to stop ICE. If it's not a massive people's movement, then what's going to stop them?
Yeah.
No, I didn't hear that, Danny, that he was shot. I mean, I heard he was injured, but I guess my question, Danny, is like, what does it look like to open up diplomatic relations with the United States in that way, without Venezuela in one way or another not becoming extremely vulnerable to the United States coming in? because I think that's the worry for a lot of people that are supportive of Venezuela is if you're opening up the doors to the United States, same way, we can even talk about Russia doing it. When the Soviet Union did it, that didn't end well. So it's kind of like, yeah, diplomacy is the way to go. Conversations are the way to go, especially if they want Maduro back, which I know a lot of sources in Venezuela have reported that's the goal is to get Maduro back, and that's their president. How would something like working with the U.S. look like without giving in to the threats from the State Department?
Yeah, I mean, diplomacy is diplomacy. That doesn't mean the negotiations aren't going to break down as they've broken down every time. I mean, let's remember.
Mhm. The internet just went out.
Oh.
Danny, your internet has gone out. Try to go out and come back in if you can to finish up those thoughts. Matt, like, what do you think about that? Like, how do you negotiate with an entity like the United States?
I mean, it's probably the hardest thing you can imagine doing. I mean, we've been watching the Ukraine peace deals not happen, and a lot of that is because of our reputation. I mean, look at our history. I mean, the world knows. They know that we are the most untrusting entity when it comes to, hey, sign this document. Here, you sign, we sign, we got an agreement. No, we don't. We break every deal we ever make. So how can talking about an agreement and agreeing on something, how can you not see that pattern? So no, I think it's I wouldn't wish that on anyone, having to sit down with us, with the US, and sit down and make a deal. It's got to be the hardest thing you can possibly do. But like Danny mentioned, being open to diplomacy, that's different than saying we're going to have a deal. And I think it's important to put yourself out there and say, we're willing to have a discussion. Where that's going to go, I mean, man, just look at our history. We are not, it's something we shouldn't be holding our breath for right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I have obviously I can commend them trying to have conversations with the US in order to get the president back, in order to show that they are the ones that are always willing to have a conversation. And we've seen this with Russia in their attempts to have conversations with the United States and really figure this out. But again, in my opinion, it's just so hard to see that would be taken seriously, because the United States tend to respect power, and they tend to not respect, at least Donald Trump, at least even beyond Trump, I would say the State Department in general respects power and respects strength. They don't really respect diplomacy.
No.
It's just not how they look at strength. And so for me, I just have a hard time thinking like that's going to go anywhere, but maybe that's the whole point, right? Okay, well, we've tried everything and they're not respecting us. So now, what else? And unfortunately, Venezuela, as Danny mentioned earlier, is not, it doesn't have the billions in war budget that we have. And they have, unfortunately, a lot of the South American now neighboring countries are pretty much have shifted towards a US-backed Zionist government, save Colombia and Brazil. And those two are a lot less, I would say, resistance-minded than Venezuela. And, you have Mexico being warned in North America, you have Cuba being warned, you have Nicaragua in Central America being warned. And so what I think we're facing is a huge attack on Latin America in an effort to perhaps face China, in an effort to resource extract and gain as much resources in the global market. And I think that's pretty much what we're seeing in Venezuela. So I don't want to be negative, and I definitely want to be positive and think that Venezuela is going to come out of this still with Bolivarian people in charge. And I kind of do believe that if anybody could do it, it could be Venezuelans, because they are largely very, very united behind Maduro, largely at the very least united behind sovereignty, because as we've seen, and we mentioned last time on the show, there's a lot of opposition that were protesting against what was done by the United States. And it's brought even the opposition to stand against what Trump did. both
That's
in
an
and out of
important, yes.
Venezuela.
That's an important point. I think people obviously you missed that if you're watching CNN, but the point is that yes, that there's a principle in play that even if you don't like Maduro, even if you're part of this opposition movement, you saw an outside entity, specifically the U.S. empire, which is like the worst entity could have come in and grabbed your president. There's a principle to standing up against that, even if you don't like the guy. We don't have that type of principle here. I think that if hypothetically you had somebody come in, grab Trump, you had most of the country that was against Trump, that had whatever you call a Trump derangement syndrome or no kings, whatever that was, they would not be united with give us our president back. They would think that hey, he deserved that, without any sense that you're coming into our space and taking something from us that goes well beyond who's the sitting president. So that's what the Chavistas and the opposition understand together, and that's why we're seeing them uniting on this. Not 100% of them, but enough of them where it should be mentioned. And we're obviously, like I said, you're not going to see that on CNN.
Yeah, no, I agree. We would just send Trump away. We wouldn't. You wouldn't have anybody really fight for him in any way, shape, or form. Which
No.
I mean, regardless, I think it's illegal. What we did was illegal. What we did was wrong, to kidnap a sitting president and just literally show him like bloodied up, parade him in front of the world, and it's just so. It's beyond vile. It's beyond comprehension, to be honest, like that we're able to do that and get away with it. And, us and Israel are the only ones that are able to do that. And again, after Palestine, after Syria, after even Russia, Ukraine, and everything that's happened, I think people are like watching this and like, oh, okay, well, I guess if we had 2 years of genocide and that was allowed, I guess that everything's free game now. I mean, we can just go kidnapping a bunch of presidents and a bunch of people, and nobody's going to do anything. I mean, you're going to see the UN, right? The UN was condemning what happened, but what is to be done? International law is useless. I mean, none of these people, the United States and Israel, these two entities don't respect it. So, like what's next for that? And we're going to just move on to finishing the Venezuela section if Danny doesn't come back on either way. But I did want to mention something from Venezuelan analysis. So Delcy Rodriguez had this day of just a solemn act of honoring and decorating the soldiers that died during these bombings, because Venezuelan soldiers died, Cuban soldiers died, people who were basically defending Nicolas Maduro and Celia. And yeah, I mean, that's what she's been doing. She's been, holding these, I guess, vigils, you could call them. And she also made a speech where she said, honor and glory to the men and women who died in combat. No one surrendered there. There was combat here, and there was combat for this homeland. So I wanted to mention that specifically, what she said, because it's very important to hear it. So let's just go ahead and hear it, and I'll try to read it. Hopefully it's not too fast, and you can take out the banner, Jayme. To the people of the United States,
el pueblo de Venezuela,
the people of Venezuela
no merecía
did not
esta
deserve
agresión
this vile warmongering aggression
de parte de una potencia
from a nuclear power.
Decía yo ayer,
Yesterday I said that it has become a stain
en nuestras
on our relations and our
en
history.
nuestra historia. Yo he visto
I have seen it
el rostro
in the
de
faces
las
of mothers,
vi el rostro de
in the
una
face
mujer
of a woman, my mother,
cuando asesinaron
when they murdered my father,
en el rostro
in the
de las
faces of the
esposas
wives of the
de los
fallen.
caídos, he visto el
I have
rostro
seen the
de
face of my mother,
también perdió
who
un
also
hijo.
lost a husband,
Y en el rostro de las
and in the
niñas
faces of the girls and
que
boys
perdieron a sus
who lost
padres,
their
he
fathers.
visto el
I have seen the
rostro
faces of
de
Jorge and
el mío,
myself,
cuando siendo niños perdimos también
when as
a
children we
nuestro
also
padre
lost our father,
vilmente
who was
asesinado.
viciously murdered.
Yo les digo
I
que
tell
esas
you that
heridas
those wounds
nos acompañarán
will
por
remain
siempre,
with us forever.
pero que saber
But knowing
que los seres
that
queridos
the
que
loved
hemos
ones we have
perdido
lost,
murieron
died for a just cause,
por una causa noble.
for a noble
Esa causa
cause.
justa
And
y
that
noble
just and
se llama
noble cause
Venezuela,
is called
se llama la
Venezuela.
independencia y
It's
la
called the
libertad de
independence and
Venezuela.
freedom of
Honor y
Venezuela.
gloria a los
Honor and glory
hombres
to the
y
men
mujeres
and women
que murieron
who died
en
in combat.
combate. Aquí nadie se entregó.
No one
Aquí
surrendered here.
hubo
There was
combate.
combat
Hubo
here,
combate por
and there
esta
was a
patria.
combat for this homeland. Okay, Matt, just off the bat, just your take on her and what she said there, because I think even if you thought that she sold out Maduro and she was some sort of plan, after seeing that, I really have a hard time believing that she doesn't mean what she said. And I've seen a lot of politicians give performances, and a lot of people talk like this, and she just doesn't seem even like a politician to me, to be honest.
This was a very powerful moment you just showed, and I hope people can go find this on their own and share it out or share this clip out, because it shows us something that we don't have here. We don't have leaders, Trump or no Trump, we don't have leaders in the U.S. that respond this way to this type of this type of
Right.
insanity. That when you have a people that believe in something and are running their country that should not be interfered by outside sources, and you come and you destroy that, you kidnap their president, to have this type of, I would say, resolve that she seems to have, and you see the look on the faces of who she's talking to, and there's something very powerful happening that we would never have anybody talk like this. We get into vengeance mode immediately. We get into how are we going to destroy war on terror. We're going to smoke them out of their caves. That's not, this is an organic response. And then again, we go back to the history. You look at her, people don't know her father, Jorge Antonio Rodriguez. He was jailed and tortured to death by a US backed government in the 70s. So there's a history there of resolve, and she's representing that in the Chavista movement. And I have to say, like, this is, if there's a crack in the fortress, that is not, I've almost, like, just watching this, I've kind of reframed myself here. I understand that there's people that are afraid of this, that there's afraid that there's going to be a tipping point here for her. But watching this, I absolutely, my confidence is definitely back that this will not, they will go down fighting tooth and nail to maintain the Chavista movement and the Chavista way to the death, like 300 style. That's how it's going to be. They're not going to budge.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think any sort of sabotage, if it occurred at a high level or any level, came from her. I have a hard time believing it based on not just what she said, but her background, as you mentioned. I think there's a difference, and I think someone in the chat said, "Well, Kamala Harris comes from revolutionaries," but Kamala Harris's dad wasn't murdered by a U.S.-backed government. There's a huge difference when you have, like, that sort of history. It would be hard to overcome that, because now it's not just political, it becomes personal, it becomes a part of who you are. And honestly, her speech, I have to say, is reminiscent of speeches I've heard in Lebanon from Hezbollah, speeches I've heard from the Palestinian, pro-Palestinian warriors that are pretty much know that they're fighting against Zionist aggression till the end, from the Yemeni Ansarullah people who are willing to die and know that their martyrdom is actually something that they will look forward to no matter what, win or lose, because they're doing it for a cause. And this, in my opinion, is why I think Venezuela represents a threat to the United States. It's not just the oil. The oil is obviously a huge part of it in an economy that moves through capital. The resources, sure, a huge part of it. But it is also this very spirit that, a lot of people have in Venezuela. It's not just Delcy. It's literally, if you go to Venezuela, this is how a lot of people talk. This is how they are. It's intrinsic in them. You go to Peru, where I'm at right now, people don't have that. Like, at the very least, we're talking about being in Caracas. In Lima, you have the majority of very pro-US, Europe, pro-NATO type of mentality. And it has been this way for a very, very long time. You don't have this historical resistance-minded type of thing. So, of course, when the United States comes in, it's a lot more easy for them to go in and take over. Whereas in Venezuela, I think they're going to have a really hard time, mainly for that. And that, it is kind of heartbreaking because, like they would fight to the end no matter what. And that's also, those are words I've heard from Venezuelans themselves, that they would go down fighting no matter what. So,
yeah. I would say one last thing about this topic that that is worth mentioning, and that is the petrodollar. And I would have to say that even with our history, our track record of not being honest in negotiations, not being honest in deals in any sort of way in our entire history, there is something about, and again, and the military might, of course, $1.5 trillion for next year. I mean, this is insane. The amount of might that we are bringing to the table, militarily speaking. However, when we talk about the petrodollar, we're talking about there is not a sustainability to our economic system right now. And so when we look at this, the oligarchs stealing oil, stealing gold, stealing whatever resources needed for their next yacht or their next island they're going to buy, that's not actually what we're talking about. We're not talking about so much greed. We're talking about desperation. So when we say we need this oil, it's not just for more money and more wealth and more hoarding of the wealth. There's something about, if China and Russia and BRICS starts using other sources, other currencies besides petrodollar, we're screwed. And we've known this for decades. So there is a desperation to us coming to the negotiating table. So that might be one little silver lining of the fact of where we're at on the timeline. And the like I said, it's not sustainable. The system we have in place is not sustainable. That might be one thing that Venezuela has in their favor. If you're talking about negotiations, is that who's really the desperate one here? Is it, I mean, both sides obviously have desperation, but how much can we, how many chips can we put in the table and bluff them out on when we don't, if we're not really holding the chips in the long term, so to say?
yeah. No, that's a good point that I don't think has been brought up enough. I mean, I do think we are shifting, and like I've said before, there are other major players now, especially China, that are on the field. So we're going to see how that develops and what that means. But I will say, despite the fact that maybe China and Russia haven't come to the aid of Venezuela in a way that some people expected them to, there are a lot of Latin Americans that have specifically told me, like, China is building and investing a lot, and it's not through bombs. And so, compared to the United States, they do appreciate that. And we heard that from our friend Stephen Septon in Nicaragua as well, who we just spoke to. So yeah, that's a good point. The last thing I want to mention on this, and by the way, Danny can't come back on because he doesn't have internet right now. He's in Angola, actually, doing some coverage or some activism there. So he's not able to come back. So next time we'll have him back on. I know a lot of you guys wanted to see him back on, but we're just going to finish up this section by putting up something that RT posted. Now, I want to post this by saying the Venezuelan government has not confirmed this. This has not come from a Venezuelan source. It is coming from a lot of other channels. RT posted it, but if it is confirmed, it won't be confirmed till later because they're not ones to put out this information just blatantly, whether it was leaked or not. So here it is. This is the alleged, the alleged betrayal here. This is coming from multiple sources now, but RT posted this. Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, allegedly fired the general in charge of Maduro's guard. His name was Javier Marcano Tabata. And the accusation is that he was responsible for the Presidential Honor Guard, the unit tasked with protecting Nicolas Maduro. And this, they state, this dismissal marks one of the first changes to her inner circle. Well, yes, and let's clarify that she's not the interim president. She is the acting president because there's not going to be another one. She is the acting president based on the fact that Maduro's gone. That is like the protocol. So there's a difference between interim and acting. Interim would be that, Maduro was replaced and she was put, but that's not what happened. So I don't know if this is true or not, so I wanted to lead by saying that. If it is, we're going to find out later. It will be confirmed. But right now, there's been several leaks from several outlets that have said that this guy, and it would make sense, and it would back the mid-level type of betrayal. It would make sense because it would make sense in terms of how Maduro was able to be captured. But again, Venezuela has the government hasn't stated anything on that. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I don't know anything to say on that.
I would just say let's be open, and I appreciate you saying it's alleged because we haven't confirmed, and RT put it out there. But I would say it doesn't if it is confirmed, it doesn't necessarily mean betrayal. It means incapability. I mean, clearly you have 100+ people murdered. Mostly his inner circle, his guards are murdered in cold blood in daylight. And so his lead guy, the guy that was supposed to protect him, is alive and didn't get killed and didn't protect him. We could at least say he's bad at his job, so needs to be fired. I mean, there's that. Let's just start with that.
Yeah.
But that's why, I mean, and then we can get into the betrayal part. But yeah, that's what I would just keep that on the table as well.
For sure. I guess Danny or Matt, let's go ahead and tackle section 1. Let's go back to section 1 because I think this is a section that I think we have a lot to say about. It's not really, there's not a lot to say in terms of what actually happened, but in terms of what it implies for the American people, because we started talking about how a lot of people tell you and me, all these places are unsafe. Mexico's unsafe. Be careful. But in the United States, we are the ones that have the police shooting people. We have now ICE imprisoning people, taking down American citizens, and now killing American citizens. Because if I'm not mistaken, this was an American citizen that was killed. And whether or not a citizen, even if they were a resident or whatever, the fact that, again, we're in a position where we have to say, even if a person committed a crime, shooting them on the spot shouldn't be the first go-to. But this happens so often in the United States with police and with, forces that we've come kind of numb to it. And every day you hear about something happening in the United States. And for me, it's honestly one of the most unsafe places in the world. And I think we're sort of kind of gaslit into thinking it's not because of all the comforts and all the the things that we have there. I mean, you go to any other country, you're not going to have as big of houses. You're not going to have as big of roads. Not everybody's going to have a car. It's going to look different. It's not going to look as, clean in a lot of places. And we use that to make us believe that we live in a safe world. But the reality is, unless you are made of a lot of money, you're going to confront, you're going to see people that don't live like that, or you're going to be in areas that aren't like that. And in the United States right now, what's been happening with ICE, which can be tied to Venezuela, because a lot of these Venezuelans, and I showed the video the other day, are being, that are anti-Maduro or are coming to the US only to be incarcerated in these prisons. And they're like, wait a minute, we thought that Maduro was the dictator. Why are we being put in prison? We didn't do anything, or we thought we had a visa. Some of these people had visas. Yep. And they're being taken in. So, just starting on that, a lot of what we're told isn't true. So what happened recently that everybody's talking about, and there's an outrage, and believe it or not, there are people defending this still, were that a woman was shot by an ICE agent in Minneapolis. Her name was Renee Nicole Good. Okay. And not only was she shot, but witnesses said that an ICE agent, basically the ICE agents impeded the paramedics and people from helping her after she was shot. They blocked the road with their vehicles, and they didn't even allow the help to get to her. So in addition to the shooting, now there's that. And of course, the response, or the ICE has said that they feared for their life. Therefore, they shot this woman, Nicole Good. And the wife of the woman that was shot was there as well. And, this has become very politicized again, as usual, with a lot of the right saying, she was this woke lesbian and all this stuff, and that she shouldn't have been there, and activism kills, and that you shouldn't be being an activist or trying to talk to these ICE agents who are just doing their job, and that's going to get you killed, so you shouldn't do that. But I guess my thing is, Matt, like, if activism gets you killed, then do you live in a free country? Like, where do you live? You know?
No, that's exactly what we're thinking. Watching the video, seeing the responses. I mean, you have people that are, and I think this is a moment we really need to look at. This is a very significant self-reflection moment. So if everybody's seen this video now, if you are watching this thing and if your instinct is to protect the people doing their job that have a hard time, going around and capturing people, and it's a tough job, and someone has to do it, and your instinct is to be suspicious of the person that was murdered right off the bat, you need to do some self-reflection, because where does that mindset come from? We can break down the horrible coverage from Fox News, the blatant lies from Kristi Noem and Trump, who blatantly lying. I mean, literally Trump putting out on his social that he's surprised that the agent isn't hospitalized and is still alive. I mean, just blatant descriptive lies, right? But put all that aside. We need to look at ourselves in the mirror and people around you, your neighbors and friends and family. And like, I think it's worse than Trump is lying, Kristi Noem's lying, Fox News is lying. It's worse than that. If you're wired to think this on your own, I think that if they all were quiet, if they were dead silent, if Fox pulled the plug on their broadcast, if Trump didn't tweet anything out, if Kristi Noem didn't say anything, there's still people in our country that are wired to watch the same video we're watching and blame the victim. They're already wired to do this. This is the problem I see. This is a massive problem. How are we all watching the same thing and getting it's like we're living in this bizarre world. So yeah, we can go and attack. We can go say Fox News, Trump, Kristi Noem, how dare you? But that's not the heart of the problem. Is that we've, as Americans, have been divided. We talk about being divided, being pitted against each other, hating your neighbors. We've been talking about this for months and months and months and months. And this is the society we're in. But when we're watching this video and you can conclude that this person should have obeyed orders, or she got what she deserved, and your instinct is to look at her history. What type of activist was she? She was a disruptor. Oh, she lived a life of wanting to get into stuff, wanting to get into trouble. Well, you get what you deserve. This mindset, this comes from IDF, from Israel, from Palestine, I love kids, I love children. What about Palestinian children? Well, they get what they deserve, So this is a get what you deserve mindset that we really need to look at and say, how did we get like this? How did half our country, and I hate to just say half the country, but how did a good amount of us get to the point where we're watching the same video and you're blaming the person? It's a less than human. It means that you've lost your humanity. If you cannot look at the human being that just lost their life and just start with that. We don't care about we can look at the activism or non-activism or lifestyle or non-lifestyle or whether she was leaving or staying. None of that matters. That's all secondary. A human being was murdered. Where is our humanity? That's the problem here.
Yeah, that is, I agree with you from, an emotional standpoint, right? Like, how do you look at this and even put the onus on the person that's no longer even here to defend themselves? Like, it's lunacy. But even when you look at it logically, like, the person was leaving, like she was leaving. Like, so that if for these people that, like to break things down and talk about law and order and logic, okay, well, she was leaving. Do they have our ICE agents are on another level right now. They are committing a lot of crimes that they're not being held accountable for against American citizens. And I recall on this channel, and I'm sure on yours, we talked about how this was going to lead back to having consequences for regular U.S. Americans, how the pursuit of, undocumented people was going to come back and basically end up hurting U.S. citizens. And now we have seen U.S. citizens arrested. We have seen U.S. residents taken into prison, U.S. citizens taken into prison. I recently saw the story of a man who was lived in the United States for 30 years, and he had a green card, and he died in ICE detention. And he was married to an American woman, and he had a green card, and he died in ICE detention, and that's being investigated. And now we're seeing, a U.S. citizen who, by the way, according to the Constitution, you have the right to protest, you have the right to whatever. We see, I mean, what is it? If I'm standing near a protest, am I going to be shot just because I'm standing near a protest? If I say, hey, I don't like ICE, I think what you're doing is wrong, should I be shot? Like, where do you draw the line then? If you start justifying this, and if they're using the same old, tagline of, oh, well, I fear for my life. How could you're a whole squadron of you with guns. How do you fear for your life if this is a person that doesn't have a weapon? I mean, at most you could say she has a car that could be used as a weapon, but there's a whole bunch of you that could stop her. I mean, without killing her. But the first instinct to kill and people justifying it really says a lot about who we are as a society and where we are. I mean, it's not, you don't have to politicize this, I think, left or right. What you should do is look at it as right or wrong. What was done is wrong. And the other thing that's been a lot of hypocrisy has been called out on the right is, all the time they talk about, oh, it's the Black issue and Black people aren't respecting the police. They're not following the law, or even on the liberal end, that this only happens to Black people. No, this is now happening to everybody. This has been happening, as somebody mentioned in our chat. This has been happening for a while to a lot of people, especially, of course, minorities. Yes, we know. But it also happens to a lot of working class people, a lot of people with no money, a lot of activists. Now, I think, the fact that it was a white woman, some people are pointing out, well, where's your defense of this white woman that was shot by an entity that is putting a bunch of people, including American citizens, in jail. I mean, this is a legal American citizen. Aren't you outraged that she was shot and killed by, a big government force? I mean, there's so much that you could discuss about this whole situation that I think kind of exposes the hypocrisy of a lot of people. And for me, it's like, well, the fact is, somebody who shouldn't have been shot and killed was shot and killed, and in broad daylight. And the United States government is still talking about how dangerous Iran is and how awful Iran is, how awful China is, how awful, Russia is, and how nobody has freedom in any of these countries, and Venezuelan cartels and gangs. And look what they're doing. Maduro's motorcycle gang is out there. And it's like, we're in the United States, and I'm seeing people get shot. And I have people close to me that are like, I don't even want to go to the US when I see people getting shot every day. Like, it's a dangerous place, especially after they're seeing what Donald Trump has done. Do you think for a second that everything that we're doing to Venezuela and everything we've done to all of these other countries in the Middle East, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and countries in Africa, Libya, all of these countries that we have gone after, do you think for a second that those tactics aren't going to be used against you? Well, here is proof that they basically are already being used against you, a US citizen. Anybody could have been that woman. Even if you just didn't want ICE in your neighborhood. There's a lot of people I know that don't like ICE in their neighborhood in California and Los Angeles that basically say get out, and they stand there and they don't let them come into hospitals. They don't let them come into establishments. Should they all be shot and killed because they're defending, their community from what they perceive as an oppressive aggressor? Like, where is the line?
I feel like we're broken records here, Fee, that we've been saying it. Whatever happens over there is going to happen here. We've been saying this like on and on. And people what does it take? Does it take a white woman, U.S. citizen, to be murdered in cold blood by an ICE agent as she's trying to leave? Is that the moment that it takes? I don't think this moment is. On one hand, I'll say this. Look, this is not enough to change a person's mind who's already had their mind warped to this. And I'm going to go back to it's Zionist. It's a Zionist mindset, a superior mindset that you can be better than even your own kind. This is why it's not good enough. It's a white woman. It's not good enough because for them, she's a traitor. This is just like an Israeli protesting on behalf of Palestine. They will say, well, you've crossed the line. You don't automatically get to be one of us. You have to behave like one of us. There's a superiority element to it. So she doesn't fit the bill. It's not enough for them to change their mind. However, on the other end, from an activist, from a people's movement, this could be enough. This could be a moment of clarity that we've needed way before Black Lives Matter. That went off the rails. It wasn't the right. There's a message about power, corrupt power, taking advantage of people that don't have power, and that's what that was supposed to be. In George Floyd, which took place just very close by from this incident. So it's very interesting that it's coming back to the same place. Yeah. But the message is bigger. It's broader. It's something that's not going to be pushed by the mainstream. And that's going to make the difference. It's going to make this different than George Floyd because it's not going to be pushed from the top down. It's from the bottom up. And that's what it should have always been. It should always be all of us together fighting corruption, fighting power. And what you said about he was too afraid. He had to defend himself. We're done with that BS argument that you are afraid when you're supposed to be doing your job and you're supposed to be the hero. The hero isn't supposed to be afraid. You're not supposed to pull your gun because you got afraid. That's not okay, and it's not an excuse. And the trigger happy, we can do what we want without any consequences. That's what we have to recognize. Here's a moment in time where we all need to get behind and say, no more immunity for people that have a badge and a gun and some sort of like you can do whatever you want and the rest of us has to get in line. That's not going to happen anymore. That I do think that this is a moment for that. But if your mind's already warped and you're watching this video by yourself and you think she did something to bring this on, I don't know what's going to help you at this point if you still believe that garbage.
And Matt, this country, our country, the United States, thrives on division. It thrives on getting people polarized and against each other. And Donald Trump there's a reason why he's a huge part of that, right? So Donald Trump said, I have just viewed the clip of the event which took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is a horrible thing to watch. The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator. That's the first thing he talks about. And the woman driving the car was a very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer. As Matt said earlier, this is a blatant lie, who seems to have shot her in self-defense. Based on the attached clip, it is hard to believe he is alive, but it is now recovering in the hospital. The situation is being studied in its entirety. But the reason these incidents are happening is because the radical left is threatening, assaulting, and targeting our law enforcement officers and ICE agents on a daily basis. They are just trying to do the job of keeping America safe. We need to stand by and protect our law enforcement officers from this radical left movement of violence and hate. So as far as I know, by the way, it's not just leftists or the radical left or even people that are remotely left at all that are opposing ICE. I mean, there's a lot of people that are even not political that are saying what ICE is doing is wrong. There's a lot of Republicans that I've spoken to that are saying what ICE is doing is wrong, especially the Republicans that come from Latino backgrounds. A lot of them, some in my own family, have rescinded their support of Donald Trump based on the fact that he is going after people, his administration with ICE are going after people in this very brutal way. So it's become now a national concern as to what's being done because people are not dumb and they're eventually seeing, hey, this could be done to anybody. I mean, all the surveillance, all the guns, all of this type of treatment. And, they look at it as excessive and they look at it as, are we next? Because now we're, who knows? There's been talk about revoking citizenship. There's been talk about, doing all of these things, going back and changing the Constitution. All of these things are up in place. So people are afraid, and these actions have pushed people away. So it's not the radical left only leading this, if whatever the radical left means, actually.
Yeah. Right.
But so it's a lot of people that are standing against this. But yeah, you're right. Like the fact that our president is blatantly lying on his social media, saying things that aren't true, and there's a lot of people that support him and put him on a pedestal, and he can do no wrong. That's what he's aimed to do. He's aimed to divide people. This isn't a logical response. This is an outright emotional response to try to get people to justify the unjustifiable, which is, I mean, in the era we live in, Matt, I mean, this is just one of the many instances that we're seeing, but it's crazy that it's out there.
I mean, just reviewing that tweet again, that Truth Social post, there's obviously so many red flags in that, so many lies, but the part that I now, reading it again, I think it's the beginning that's the most disturbing, when he says, we've been reviewing this in detail. We've been looking at it. And he says, we're going to keep looking at it, but as if he's painting this picture that we sat down thoughtfully, took some time and really studied it. And here's the conclusion. So what does that tell us? That tells us there's a lot of things this could be. So best case scenario, he's just a dumb idiot who doesn't know how to evaluate anything. So that would be worst case. And that's really bad if it's that, which we know it's not that. But if it was that, if he's that dumb, that's his ability, that's the extent of his critical thinking abilities. That's very dangerous, that our sitting president has no critical thinking skills when saying, I took some time with this thing. So that's best case scenario. On the other hand of it, he's telling us to our faces, he's telling his base, really, he's telling his base that I can say whatever I want, it will be true. And that is probably the most scariest part. Not the lies in there, because he lies all the time, and presidents lie all the time. And it's not unique to Trump. Lie. But what he's saying is, I can tell you something that's obviously the exact opposite, and it will stick. So it's almost like this code, this message of this is the world we live in. So deal with it. And I'm going to double down on this. I'm not going to apologize for it. Obviously, it's going to only go further to exemplify this lie that I'm starting. And it's so effing obvious, but this is the world we live in. I can say whatever it is, whatever I want it to be, and that's what it will be. And it's not just him, everyone else doing it too, right? It's JD Vance, it's Kristi Noem. They're all, whatever we say is what is. And that's the world we need to recognize that we're all going to be affected by that, no matter who you voted for, no matter what you look like, no matter what your citizen status is. We're all affected by this, and we need to take that part the most seriously in that entire tweet.
This is kind of the point I wanted to get to as well, this next one, because look, all the time we talk about Iran, right? And if he said, if Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to the rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. And the person above posted, what if ICE shots and kills violently? So, now everything we do, it's just compared to a lot of the things we say, right? What about all the protesters mangled by Maduro? Or what about the protesters in Iran, or the protesters in Afghanistan, or Syria, whatever the case may be? What we kill protesters here. I mean, and now, like, again, there's a hypocrisy, because we stood by defending the people who protested on January 6th, right? And that they shouldn't have been shot, people like Ashley Babbitt. And a lot of liberals were like, no, she deserved it. She got the same thing. She got what she deserved, blah, blah, blah. And now we are again, and we keep going back and forth in these instances, right? And the thing is, you need to be consistent across the board. None of these people deserve to be shot for protesting or any of that. I mean, this is absolute insanity. And so again, there's U.S. hypocrisy thrown, right in our face. If you're going to talk about Iran, if you're going to talk about these other countries, maybe don't shoot your own people because they have a difference of opinion in what the government's doing. It's just, yeah
no, and it's too bad more people aren't drawing that correlation between J6 and I guess this incident where you have an innocent person being murdered by a police. I mean, why can't we be consistent with that? Why can't we all say that they're both wrong and they both were murdered by somebody who used excessive power? And it's too bad. And I hope there's maybe some lefties that are looking back at that. Maybe I don't know, maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but Look back at that. Take a look. If you are furious about this, which you should be furious about Renee Good. Absolutely. But if you have a moment, maybe go back and look at J6 and kind of look and go, hey, maybe we get that? Maybe we were playing a little tribal knee-jerk reaction when we first heard that the greatest attack on our capital ever. These people all should be in jail, and if they died, good riddance. I mean, let's go back and look at that now. But I don't know if they will. But you're right, Fee. It's about being consistent. And then that person calling out the tweet on Trump. Let me just be clear here. That's not throwing a curveball at Trump. He doesn't care. He's saying the words are that he says is what's true. He's saying Iran, we have to look at Iran. We have to come to the protection of people that are being violently attacked in Iran. No, it doesn't apply to ICE. Why? Because Trump can say the language that he wants it to be, and that's what it'll be. It'll be that the ICE officer, he's the one recovering in the hospital. He's the one that almost died. That's what it is because he said it. And that's the world we're in right now. And that's, again, the scary part.
Yeah, that is the scary part. So Matt, like going back towards the last section, going back out towards what's happening in the world. And also, I guess it involves the United States. Of course it does. Russia and Ukraine have been at war now, and we're going on year 4 now, which is hard to believe. But there's been negotiations or talks having back and forth between the United States and Russia since the beginning of 2025. And based on what I know, these negotiations have been pretty serious and all of that. Now, recently, we know that Vladimir Putin's residence was attacked. And in my opinion, that the way that residence was attacked was really dumb. Somebody had to be like really dumb to do it because Putin wasn't there and they got nothing out of it. Ukraine got absolutely nothing out of it except, to look like they are standing against peace, right? And in retaliation, though, Russia has said that they would show some sort of response. And as of a few hours ago, a few days ago now, there's been several attacks from Russia. One of the ones I'm going to highlight is the firing of the hypersonic Oreshnik missile that basically hit an area called Lviv, close to Poland in western Ukraine. And it pretty much landed Ukraine, rendered Ukraine completely, much of it without power. And this ballistic missile, this Oreshnik missile, was done overnight. And in a way, Russia was able to showcase how quickly that missile could get to that part of the world. And the EU and NATO have gone off and started saying, wow, we're so close to the EU border. How could you do that? This is a threat. This is why Putin is Hitler and why this is a huge threat. And that's pretty much the gist of that. I want to go to what the Russia Today has said, because this is, we have the Guardian and we have CNN, but the RT says that the Oreshnik was a response for the attack on Putin's residence. So that's coming from Russian state media, and they hit a number of critical facilities, and that it was targeting drone production facilities, energy infrastructure, and other military-related facilities. And it carried out in response to a terrorist attack, an attempted terrorist attack by the Kiev regime on the residence of Vladimir Putin in the Novgorod region. This was said by the Defense Ministry today. And so I think it's important to talk about this, and then also mention the fact that Russia also struck Kiev. And Russia has gone into Kiev before, but not so much as it has now. So they also had an air attack on Kiev that allegedly, according to Reuters, killed 2 people, and that was reported by Ukrainian authorities. And this was done in Kiev's northern sector, and the strike set ablaze a medical facility that was operating there, and a body was found inside. They released several photos showing the Russian strikes in Kiev. Now, what I want to get to is what has been happening in the background of all of this, right? We know we had the Russian vessel Marinera that was seized by the United States. We also have other vessels that have reportedly also been seized by the United States. How is there a peace deal still going with all this happening? And I want to just get your response to that, Matt, really quick before I continue.
I mean, it's unbelievable that we're even talking about a peace deal, being close to a peace deal with all this going on. The big news, I guess, that you're saying is this is the response to what we would call an actual terrorist attack on Putin's home, an attempted assassination. That's what this is about, is responding to that, which it sounds like Russia always their response seems to be very thorough and thoughtful and not chaotic. So it doesn't seem chaotic on their end. But how the hell are we still talking about a peace deal when what is Ukraine going to do next? And why are we not having a dialogue about this? Is Trump doing something about this? Is he where is he at in this? It seems to me like he's kind of been away from this ever since he put out the original, was it 28-point plan, and that, it was months ago, and that's been whittled down, and it doesn't seem like anything's happening in that regard as far as moving that conversation forward. But obviously Ukraine is the one that needs to be sat down and talked to. You can't continue these blatant attacks on Russia and then not think that of course you're going to get retaliation, but how much more can they do? I mean, it seems like it's a sinking ship. I don't know if we're going to actually get a peace deal if this keeps going on. Are you seeing, I mean, Fia, I'll just pass it back to you. Are you seeing anything on the side where Ukraine is sitting now that they're done? Was that is there anything looking like that they're done with their nefarious behavior, or are we going to is this going to keep extending into year 5 would be next? I would think.
No, I mean, so I think based on Ukraine's actions, I think this is like all the United States needs to pretty much say that Ukraine needs to be stopped and needs a peace deal. We know the United States is behind this war. We know that they're the ones that actually led to this whole thing happening. Right now, they're putting it on NATO, they're putting it on the EU, and in the conversations between Kirill Dmitriev and Stephen Witkoff and all of these delegations that have met throughout the past year, it's been like, oh, Europe and the UK want to continue this war. But most recently, what Ukraine did pretty much shows that, whether or not it was an inside job where somebody told Ukraine to do this to basically make it look like they're idiots and they're useless. The fact that Russia responded in the background of talks coming up. So there's talks coming up with between the Russian State Duma and the US representatives on a peace deal. That's already happening yet again in January this month. And so the fact that Russia did that in the background signals to me that Russia wants to show, look what we can do. We can not only go into Kiev and take it, we can also go very close to Poland. Poland is the area that NATO has been inching to use against Russia. There is much animosity between the Russian people and the Polish people. There always has been since World War II. And it hasn't gone away. That friction that's there has not gone away. And Russia, by sending the Oreshnik, has shown, look, we can hit very close to Europe. We don't want to, but this is simply a response to what was done to us. We're just letting you know, if there are no negotiations, we're going to win this through the battle, like the battlefield. We're already there. Ukraine can't do anything. Ukraine can try to attack very easily intercepted send Russian drones to Moscow, which they do all the time, send them to Sochi, which they do all the time, and then try to impose a terrorist attack on a US president, which, by the way, I have a hard time believing that Ukraine would be able to do that without the United States knowing. So I just don't buy that the United States didn't know that. So that's just my opinion. I just don't buy it that they wouldn't know. Now, my opinion is, Matt, that there is actually, this kind of makes it impossible for anybody to back Ukraine, because not only is Ukraine putting out dumb attacks against Russia that don't gain it anything, they are also looked on as unreliable, completely just, at the whim of its funders, and also just standing in the way of any sort of negotiation. And Zelensky in particular is not being looked on favorably, not being looked at as taken seriously. He never was, but now more than ever, the puppet I think is really, really, the train is gone. His use is pretty much finished. And now you can say, well, okay, why don't we negotiate something while you have anything at all, where you don't have any cards? Ukraine has less and less cards each time to negotiate anything. So in my opinion, based on what we're seeing, and even based on the actions around the Marinera vessel, where now the United States has allowed the 2 Russians that were on that ship, because according to RT and according to Russian media in general, there were mostly Ukrainians, some Georgians, and 2 Russians. They've allowed them off the ship. Now, there are other ships, right? So I find all of this interesting in the background, because I do think there are elements in the United States that want to continue war with Russia, but I also think that there are elements that actually want to negotiate an end, because they see Russia as more favorable towards economic negotiations in the Arctic, economic negotiations in the Donbass minerals, and they see them as a workable type of more reliable and powerful. Because remember what I said about the United States, they respect power. They don't respect any type of submissiveness. They don't respect, if you're going to talk about integrity. And so what I'm looking at is Russia is showing that they're powerful. They're showing that they've got the majority of things handled in Ukraine. And what's left? Why don't we just cut a deal, make a negotiation? And that's why I think that this is actually going to happen this year. That, and also the reopening of businesses in Russia, the potential for reopening several businesses that are American-based, including McDonald's, the potential for Russian media to return to the United States, which is already happening. These things signal to me that there are some negotiations happening. So I just kind of want to give my take. Like I said, right, most of these, I guess most of the people on the vessels were actually Ukrainian, not Russian. And there's something that was done recently by the Congresswoman Anna Polina Luna, who's been very much hailed by Kirill Dmitriev. And she said that from her office, they got that the main purpose of these meetings, that they're going to have meetings between the State Duma deputies and the Russians aimed at peace and stability in Russia and Ukraine. And the main purpose of these meetings is a dialogue aimed at achieving peace and constructive interaction, designed to promote de-escalation and long-term stability in Russia and Ukraine. This is what a rep of the Representative Luna said. And I don't think that we're not going to see peace. I think Russia really wants peace. And I think they're getting a lot of criticism from a lot of people, and some in the defense, basically saying, like, how could you do that when they literally just captured your vessel? Well, like Venezuela, they tend to lead not with retaliation, but with diplomacy. And if they do retaliate, as you mentioned earlier, they do so in a very meticulous and focused manner. So I actually think we are going to see an end to the affairs, but I think it's going to take some time. I don't think we're there yet. And yeah, it's not that I'm being optimistic necessarily. It's just like how things are working, and I didn't see them like this before. So I don't know.
Well,
Here's
this
hoping for
is the
that.
first I'm hearing, Fee, about Russian media returning to the U.S. This, you mentioned the McDonald's. These are hopeful elements. This kind of changes things, and then this is a slow process. Obviously, you don't snap your fingers and everything's cool the next day. But if these things are in the works and this type of relationship, we seem to be. And you said we don't generally respect diplomacy, right? But if we're at a point where we have no other option and we need to put our focus elsewhere on our other regime change wars and our other, money laundering schemes in other parts of the world, maybe this is the moment that we see some sort of release, some sort of conclusion. However, I'm thinking about NATO as a whole. Does that mean that we are defying NATO? Does that mean that other NATO countries are livid about this, that they want full-on war? We know France has been egging on war with Russia. All the warnings to their civilians, and you guys better get ready. We're getting in the streets. This is going all the way. This is where they're at, but we're not there. Does this mean, Fee, are you seeing that, like, if in fact we can come to a deal where the U.S. stands with Russia and Ukraine, does that mean there's a chance that we can break off of NATO from this? Is that best case scenario, or is that just some pipe dream? Because if we could get that to happen, that changes everything, at least in that conversation. Obviously, our other full-scale escalation, we have to obviously continue dealing with that in Israel and all that stuff. But is that some sort of silver lining that can come out of this? Is that even possible?
I mean, I think it would be possible. I don't know if we would need to get rid of NATO, because like NATO is fully, I would say, weak, right? Like with the EU being so weak too, they can't function alone. And because in response to what you're saying, I want to put the last tweet in the section because it relates to this whole thing. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said, "I believe the time has come for Europe to speak with Russia." And she said this very, very recent. I think it was as of like a couple days ago, maybe the day before, if not January 9th today. And it's interesting that this was said on after what Russia strikes. I find that very interesting. That she stated that, because we know, as you mentioned, that NATO has been an impediment to any sort of peace talks, and they've ramped up a lot of like things against Russia rather than decrease them. But on the other hand, the United States seems to be doing the opposite, the Trump administration. And I think it's not because the Trump administration wants peace or because Trump is a peace-seeking president. That would be dumb to think that. It's because they want to cut some sort of deal that they think will benefit the United States. And it's as simple as that. And Russia has been, willing to sit down and have these conversations. And they also, want to end a war. It's 4 years. It's going to have consequences on Russia, no matter they be the winner, no matter, Ukraine being in shambles. It still affects Russia as a whole. It still affects the population. It affects a lot of things. And I think, when you talk about the whole economic and business side of it, that's when you're going to see, that's when you can tell like things are actually happening, because for that to advance, you have to have something on the table that is of concern. And I think they will want to achieve that in this administration rather than in the next one, because anything can happen in the next administration, and that's the guarantee would have to be that things could last a bit. And obviously, Matt, I don't trust the US nor NATO. And whatever Russia does, I hope that they understand, who they're dealing with. But at the same time, I see a seriousness from both sides to end this. Whether NATO or not wants to come along, it becomes irrelevant if they themselves have become largely irrelevant,
Yeah, if they're incapable of functioning, then it becomes a moot point. Yes, absolutely. I can see that for sure.
Yeah. So, that's it, guys. I mean, we've been here an hour and 43 minutes. It's getting better. We were trying to keep this at 1:30, so we're not here forever, but we've done a lot of shows this week. We're trying to get back into it. I'm still working on my internet, but it's much better than it's been before. So hopefully Pasta will come back on Monday and we'll pick up right then where we started. Thank you all for tuning in, and thanks to Jayme for being on the ones and twos, and Matt for coming on and co-hosting with me today. There was a lot of things we talked about, and our guest Danny Shaw for coming on. So Matt, just let everybody know where you can find you. What are you up to next in the coming days?
No, believe it or not, the Homeless Left has actually been technically on a break for the last almost 2 weeks. I've been making appearances on other shows, and being here with you has been awesome. We actually have a Top Censor News. We're going to do a thing today in about an hour from now. If you guys want to tune in, Top Censor News of the week. We couldn't resist. I mean, so much went on. I'm like, man, every time we take a break, something goes down. So if you guys are looking for big stories to break, just tell me to take a break with the show, and something big will happen, because that's how it happened these last 2 weeks. But anyways, we'll be back in full form. The two shows a week starting next Tuesday. Tuesdays, Thursdays, we're on all afternoon. We also have to do something about our running time, because we've been going 4 hours or more each show. So I'm going to try and get that down. I'm going to try to get down to 3 at some point. But it's we got a lot to go through, and it's we're looking forward to the next round of shows starting next Tuesday, noon Pacific. And check us out on Top Censor News of the week on the Homeless Left. That's on Rumble, and the Homeless Left. It's at THL Presents on YouTube, but we're getting back. The algorithm is starting to work again, and you guys can type in the Homeless Left and find us on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad all of that's working for you. Glad to have you back. Yeah, Christmas and New Year. We all took breaks, so we're back at it in this crazy year so far. There's a lot, so we can't take a break now. So we'll see you guys on Monday, and truth out. Bye.